The late 1960s in California were defined by a cultural revolution of peace, rock music, and a widespread desire for freedom. Yet, beneath this vibrant surface, a much darker reality was beginning to take root across the American landscape. The country was slowly entering a terrifying new era, one that would eventually be known as the Age of the Serial Killer. Two specific names would emerge from this period, becoming nightmares that have haunted the national consciousness for decades. Edmund Kemper and Charles Manson represented two entirely different paths of violence that shook the foundations of society. While one man chose to kill with his own hands, the other used his influence to command others to commit atrocities. Despite their different methods, both men would inadvertently force the FBI to rethink how they approached violent criminal minds. Edmund Kemper was an imposing figure, standing 6 feet 9 inches tall and possessing a remarkably high level of intelligence. To those who met him, he appeared articulate and soft-spoken, a man who could easily hold a conversation for hours on end. However, hidden behind this calm and polite exterior was a deep-seated darkness that had been festering since his childhood. Kemper endured a deeply troubled relationship with his mother, marked by years of emotional abuse, humiliation, and growing resentment. At only 15 years old, the internal pressure finally broke, and he committed his first brutal murders against his own grandparents. Psychiatrists who evaluated him at the time were deeply disturbed by his cold, calculated nature and his total lack of empathy. Despite these clear warning signs, he spent years in institutions before doctors eventually concluded that he was fully rehabilitated. His release from the psychiatric facility would prove to be a catastrophic error in judgment with deadly consequences for many. By the early 1970s, a wave of fear swept through Santa Cruz as young women began to vanish without a trace. These victims were often college students or hitchhikers, vulnerable people who unfortunately trusted the wrong person at the wrong time. That person was Ed Kemper, who used his friendly, non-threatening demeanor to lure unsuspecting victims into his vehicle. Once these women were inside his car, they were effectively trapped, and many were never seen alive by their families again. Investigators eventually linked him to the tragic murders of at least 6 young women during this terrifying period of time. The violence reached a horrific peak in April 1973 when Kemper murdered his own mother while she slept in her home. He then proceeded to kill her friend, further cementing his status as a cold-blooded predator with no clear boundaries. After these final acts, he calmly fled California, but his desire for notoriety eventually led him to contact the police. When he called to confess, many officers were initially skeptical, unable to believe such a polite man could be the killer. It was impossible for them to reconcile the intelligent voice on the phone with the monster they had been hunting. Kemper eventually admitted to 10 murders, providing detailed accounts that would become essential material for future criminal psychologists. While Kemper operated as a solitary hunter, Charles Manson was busy cultivating a different, more complex kind of terror. Unlike Kemper, Manson rarely engaged in physical violence himself, choosing instead to weaponize his charisma and influence. Throughout the late 1960s, he successfully gathered a group of devoted followers who became known as the Manson family. These followers were often young people, searching for a sense of purpose, belonging, and a community to call their own. Manson provided them with that sense of identity, but he twisted it to serve his own dark and manipulative agenda. He slowly convinced his followers that they were destined to commit violence, leading them down a path of total destruction. In August 1969, the Manson family carried out one of the most shocking and brutal murder sprees in American history. Among the victims was actress Sharon Tate, who was 8 months pregnant at the time of the senseless attack. The sheer brutality of these crimes horrified the nation, shattering the illusion of peace that the era had promised. America realized that evil did not always hide in the shadows. Sometimes it looked like a smiling, charismatic cult leader. Manson was eventually convicted for orchestrating the murders, even though he had not physically carried out the attacks himself. He spent the remainder of his life behind bars, eventually passing away in 2017 while still in prison custody. By the late 1970s, law enforcement agencies were facing a growing crisis that traditional methods could not solve. The new breed of killers did not fit into the old stereotypes, as they came from vastly different backgrounds and motives. The FBI realized they needed a new, scientific approach to understand the psychological patterns behind such extreme violence. This urgent need for answers led to the development of criminal profiling, a major milestone in modern investigation techniques. Special agents began the process of interviewing some of the most notorious killers held within the prison system. Their primary goal was to decode the criminal mind, asking what motivated these people and how they selected their victims. They also hoped to identify behavioral markers that might help them stop future killers before they could strike again. Ed Kemper became one of the most important subjects in this research, stunning agents with his openness about his crimes. His high intelligence and willingness to explain his thought process provided unprecedented insight into the psychology of murder. These interviews were instrumental in shaping the FBI's behavioral science unit and establishing the foundation for modern profiling. The fascinating origins of this work were later brought to life in the acclaimed Netflix series titled Mindhunter. Produced by David Fincher, the show follows agents as they conduct these high-stakes interviews with incarcerated serial killers. The series is widely praised for its realistic portrayal of the early days of FBI research into criminal psychology. The portrayal of Ed Kemper in the show is often cited as one of the most chillingly accurate depictions on television. Mindhunter also explores the cultural impact of figures like Manson, who helped define an era of national fear. Since its release in 2017, the series has earned an impressive rating and is considered a masterpiece of true crime drama. Kemper and Manson were vastly different, but their actions forced society to confront the reality of how monsters think. By studying them, investigators were able to unlock the secrets of the criminal mind, changing law enforcement forever. This understanding has become the cornerstone of modern profiling, a legacy that continues to aid investigations worldwide. The story of these men serves as a dark reminder of the importance of psychological research in keeping society safe. We hope this deep dive into the history of criminal profiling has provided you with a new perspective on these events. If you enjoyed this look into the past, please subscribe to our channel and comment on what story we should cover next.